The High Council chamber hovered above the capital world like a crown of light. Its walls formed from layered gravity fields and ancient alloys that had witnessed 1,000 conquered civilizations. Representatives from 40 species gathered in silence as the projection sphere ignited, showing the outer rim of contested space. The humans had crossed the border again, not with diplomacy, not with threats, but with presence. For 2 centuries, humanity had played the role of a minor power, fractured governments, outdated fleets, predictable tactics. The Council archives described them as resilient but insignificant, a species to be managed rather than feared, and so the decision had been easy: send the 7th Armada, erase the border colonies, remind Earth of its place. The 7th Armada was legendary, a river of warships stretching across light minutes, carriers surrounded by lattice screens, battleships armed with stellar lances, drone swarms darkening the void. No civilization had ever survived a direct engagement with it, not once. Now the Council watched the first contact. Human ships appeared on the edge of the display, few in number, crude in silhouette, no energy signatures worth noting. Several councillors expressed mild amusement, others boredom, one even turned away. Then the stars behind the Armada flickered. At first it was dismissed as sensor noise, cosmic interference, but the flicker repeated, not random, synchronized like a heartbeat. The human fleet did not move, did not fire, did not broadcast, they simply existed. A junior analyst spoke hesitantly, reporting data loss from forward scout vessels. Telemetry vanished mid-transmission. Hull integrity readings dropped to 0 without corresponding energy spikes. Ships were not exploding, they were not burning, they were simply no longer there. The Council chamber grew quieter. On the display, the leading edge of the 7th Armada began to thin. Vessels vanished one by one, then by dozens, then in entire formations. No debris, no radiation bloom, no wreckage, space folded closed, as if nothing had ever occupied it. The Council demanded answers, demanded countermeasures, demanded retaliation. But the Armada commanders were already screaming over open channels. Weapons refused to lock, targeting systems showed empty space where enemy ships should be, and behind them, the stars continued to flicker. The humans had not fired a single visible shot. And the Council, for the first time in its long and violent history, watched without speaking. Emergency protocols flooded the Council chamber, translators overlapped, advisors shouted probabilities, yet the projection sphere showed only absence. Entire wings of the 7th Armada erased from existence, not destroyed, not displaced, but deleted. The Armada attempted a retreat, drives flared, spacetime bent, but escape vectors collapsed before completion, navigation beacons failed, jump points refused to form. It was as if reality itself had been rewritten to deny them passage. Human ships still did not advance. They remained perfectly still, a quiet line against the void. Their hulls absorbed light instead of reflecting it. Sensors attempting deep scans returned recursive errors, as though the ships existed slightly out of phase with observation itself. A Council physicist whispered a forbidden phrase: causality denial. The Council dismissed it instantly. Such technology was theoretical, catastrophic, banned by every treaty ever signed. No species would dare develop it. The risk alone would annihilate entire star systems. Another formation vanished. This time the deletion propagated outward. A ripple of nothingness swept through escort vessels, command ships, even autonomous drones that had no crew to observe their own end. The ripple did not expand randomly. It followed targeting logic, intelligent, deliberate. The Armada fired everything: plasma, antimatter, gravitational shear weapons, stellar lances that could crack moons. The firestorm lit the void brighter than a young sun. When the light faded, the human fleet was untouched. Energy readings showed the attacks had never reached them, not deflected, not absorbed, simply prevented from arriving. Weapons trajectories ended in blank equations, effects without causes. One councillor finally asked the question no one wanted to voice. What if the humans are not fighting the Armada? What if they are removing it from history? Silence answered. On the projection, the flagship of the 7th Armada attempted to broadcast surrender. Its message cut off mid-syllable as the ship vanished. Command authority cascaded into chaos. Remaining vessels began to self-destruct rather than face whatever unseen process was consuming them. Explosions bloomed, but even those were swallowed, erased before shockwaves could fully form. The stars behind the battlefield stabilized, no longer flickering, as if the operation were nearing completion. For the first time, a human signal appeared, not a threat, not a demand, a simple data packet addressed to the Council. It contained one line. We asked for a rematch. Council archives began failing across a dozen systems. Records of the 7th Armada conflicted with real-time observation. Some databases reported the fleet as destroyed centuries ago. Others insisted it had never been built. Reality itself seemed uncertain about the Armada's existence. The Council realized too late that deletion was not limited to matter. It extended to information, memory, probability. The humans were not merely erasing ships. They were removing outcomes, pruning branches of causality until only one path remained. The projection sphere showed the final moments, the last surviving ships drifting powerless, crews screaming into empty channels, then nothing, empty space, where a force once capable of toppling empires had stood. The battlefield looked peaceful, untouched, as though no war had ever occurred there. A senior counselor collapsed into their seat, whispering that such power required centuries of preparation, patience beyond reason, restraint beyond survival instinct. Another finally understood the implication. The humans had been weak on purpose. For 200 years, they had lost battles, ceded territory, signed humiliating treaties, all while perfecting a weapon that could not be rushed, that demanded observation of countless conflicts, analysis of alien doctrines, and absolute secrecy. The Council replayed historical footage. Human defeats suddenly looked different, retreats that preserved data, losses that revealed enemy tactics, wars that ended just short of extinction. Humanity had never been fighting to win, they had been fighting to learn. The human message expanded with additional context, calmly explaining that the technology used was not a weapon in the traditional sense. It was a system designed to identify hostile causal chains and terminate them at origin points, minimizing collateral reality disturbance. Translated bluntly, if the Council chose war, humanity would not destroy their fleets, it would ensure they had never existed. Fear spread through the chamber like a living thing, not panic, but something colder, the understanding that resistance was no longer meaningful. The humans closed the message with an offer, borders restored, fleets withdrawn. The Council disbanded its enforcement armadas. In return, humanity would archive the deletion parameters, not deploy them again. A mercy disguised as diplomacy. The Council voted without debate, unanimity achieved in seconds, a record. Outside the chamber, stars continued to shine, unaware that an entire armada and the age it represented had been quietly removed from the universe. In the days that followed, civilizations across known space felt the shift. Patrol routes ended abruptly, military doctrines lost relevance overnight. Border worlds reported an unfamiliar sensation, safety. The Council issued public statements citing strategic restructuring, internal failures, budgetary realignment, but no explanation satisfied the unease spreading among member species. Rumors moved faster than official channels, whispers of human gods, of weapons that erased souls, of wars that never happened. Humanity said nothing, their fleet withdrew beyond the rim, colonies resumed normal traffic, trade lanes reopened. They behaved exactly as they had before, modest, restrained, unassuming. That frightened the Council more than open conquest ever could. Privately, Council analysts tried to model the human system. Every simulation failed. The math collapsed into paradox, outcomes contradicted initial conditions, Attempts to even observe the theoretical framework caused computational feedback loops, as if the idea itself resisted scrutiny. One analyst summarized it best: "You cannot fight something that edits the rulebook while you are reading it." Monuments were erected to the Seventh Armada on worlds that no longer remembered why. Inscriptions spoke of sacrifice without context, valor without battle. Historians argued endlessly, unable to agree on what had been lost. Human diplomats attended council sessions again, polite, calm, offering trade agreements, cultural exchanges, scientific cooperation. They never mentioned the Armada, never referenced the rematch, never threatened. Their silence was heavier than any ultimatum. A junior council member finally asked a human envoy what would happen if the council broke the agreement. The envoy smiled gently and replied that nothing would happen because that future would not. No further questions were asked. Across the galaxy, military academies rewrote their curricula. Emphasis shifted from domination to coexistence, from expansion to stability, not because of moral awakening, but because for the first time, annihilation was not the worst possible outcome, erasure was. And somewhere beyond the charts, human engineers quietly archived their greatest creation, not out of fear, but out of choice, confident that its shadow alone was enough. Years later, the council chamber remained the same, but its occupants did not. Arrogance had drained away, replaced by caution, by listening, by the memory of silence where an armada once was. The projection sphere now showed joint operations, humanitarian corridors, shared research stations. Humanity had become a cornerstone of interstellar stability without ever claiming leadership. Council historians eventually reached consensus on one point: the moment that changed everything was not the deletion itself, but the fact that the humans stopped. They had proven they could end the galaxy's most powerful military force without a visible battle, without spectacle, without cruelty, and then they chose restraint. That choice echoed louder than any explosion. The Council understood now that humanity's greatest weapon was not causality denial, not temporal pruning, not reality editing. It was patience, the willingness to endure weakness until strength became absolute. In private sessions, counselors sometimes replayed the old recordings, the flickering stars, the vanishing fleets, the quiet human ships, and the chamber would fall silent again. Not out of fear this time, but respect. Because the universe had learned a final lesson: some civilizations conquer space, some dominate time, but humanity had learned to master consequence. And so the Council continued to watch, carefully, respectfully, knowing that somewhere beyond the stars, a species once underestimated was listening, waiting, and choosing.